A teenage girl with nothing but a dream is thrown out of her own home. But when an unexpected twist puts her in control of a fortune and a legacy she never saw coming, everything changes. Before we start, don't forget to subscribe for more. The sun hung low in the sky, streaking shades of orange and pink across the sleepy suburban neighborhood. Emma Reynolds pedaled her old bicycle down the cracked sidewalk, her backpack weighing heavy on her back. School had been exhausting as usual, but she wasn't thinking about exams or classmates. Her mind was locked on something far more important: her future. Her dream of becoming a veterinarian was something she clung to with quiet determination. It wasn't a glamorous dream, but it was hers. Every biology class, every extra hour spent volunteering at the local animal shelter, was a step toward that dream. The thought of it made her heart race with excitement, and a hint of fear. How would she ever afford it? College wasn't cheap, and her mom, Cynthia, barely scraped by working double shifts at the diner. But Emma didn't like to dwell on the how. She just knew she had to find a way. Her thoughts were interrupted by a rustling sound from the bushes along the road. Her eyes flicked to the side, and she spotted a bundle of tan fur limping toward the curb. She immediately hit the brakes, her heart leaping to her throat. It was a dog. A small, scruffy-looking mutt with matted fur and one paw lifted awkwardly off the ground. Its brown eyes locked on hers, wide with fear but also desperation. "Oh no," Emma muttered, tossing her bike to the side. She knelt slowly, extending her hand. "Hey buddy, it's okay. I'm not gonna hurt you." Her voice was soft, steady, the way she'd seen shelter workers approach frightened animals. The dog hesitated, ears pulled back, tail tucked between its legs. Emma's heart ached at the sight. It didn't take a veterinarian to see the poor thing had been through something terrible. "You're hurt, huh?" she whispered, inching closer. Her hand hovered just an inch from the dog's nose, letting it sniff. After a long pause, the dog gave a short, cautious sniff before lowering its head in surrender. "That's it. You're okay," she murmured, gently placing her fingers on its head. Her eyes scanned down its body. The front paw was swollen and bleeding from a deep cut. "Yikes. That's a nasty one. But don't worry. I'll get you patched up." She unzipped her backpack, pulling out a bottle of water and a clean gym towel. Gently, she cleaned the wound as best as she could. The dog whined but didn't pull away. Emma glanced around, spotting no collar or tag. "Where's your owner, huh?" she asked softly, but of course the dog didn't answer. "Doesn't matter. You've got one now." Her phone buzzed in her pocket, snapping her back to reality. She glanced at the screen. "Mom, when are you coming home? I need you here." Yeah, Emma muttered, glancing at the dog. She knew her mom would be annoyed if she was late, but there was no way she was leaving this dog behind. "All right, buddy," she said, lifting the small dog into her arms. It shivered but didn't resist. "Let's get you somewhere safe." With one hand on the dog and the other pushing her bike, Emma made her way home. The house on Oak Ridge Street wasn't much to look at. Paint peeled from the siding, and the front lawn was more patches of dirt than grass. Emma knew their neighbors whispered about them sometimes, the single mom and her difficult daughter. The house wasn't a home, but it was what they had. As soon as she stepped inside, the familiar smell of overcooked fried food and cleaning spray hit her. The living room was dimly lit by the TV, which played a rerun of some courtroom reality show. Cynthia was sitting on the couch, still wearing her diner uniform, her head tilted back, eyes closed. Her face looked worn, like someone who'd spent too much time fighting battles no one else could see. Emma quietly set the dog down on the floor, but Cynthia's eyes opened just in time to see. Emma, what is that?" Cynthia sat up straight, her eyes narrowing at the dirty, limping dog. "He was hurt, Mom," Emma explained quickly, crouching down beside the dog. "I couldn't just leave him. Emma, we don't have room for a dog. We barely have room for ourselves." Cynthia rubbed her forehead as if her migraine had just gotten worse. "You know we can't afford vet bills." "I'll pay for it myself," Emma shot back, her voice firm. "I've got my savings from working at the shelter." Cynthia raised an eyebrow. "That little stash you're saving for college? You're gonna blow it on a dog." Emma bit her tongue, heart pounding with frustration. "It's not like I'm wasting it. This is what I want to do, Mom. This is what I'm meant to do." Cynthia let out a long, tired sigh, leaning forward with her elbows on her knees. She didn't have the energy to argue anymore. "Fine. But if that dog makes a mess, it's on you." Emma's lips curled into a small, triumphant smile. "It's on me." As she knelt to check the dog's paw again, she heard Cynthia's voice call from behind her. "Emma, there's something I need to tell you." Emma glanced over her shoulder, instantly suspicious. The tone of her mom's voice wasn't sharp this time. It was soft, almost hesitant. "I've been meaning to tell you," Cynthia continued, rubbing her hands together. "Derek's moving in with us next week." Emma froze. "What?" "You heard me," Cynthia replied, forcing a smile that looked more like a grimace. "He's been staying at his brother's place, but it's too cramped. This will be better for all of us." "For you maybe," Emma muttered, still focusing on the dog's paw. "Don't start," Cynthia warned. "He's good to me, Emma. He's not like the others." Emma clenched her jaw, breathing in deeply. She'd heard it all before. She remembered Alan, the guy who borrowed money and never paid it back. Then there was Wes, who drank too much and blamed everyone but himself. And now it was Derek's turn. "Right?" Emma said flatly, wiping blood off her hands. "I'm sure he's different." "He is," Cynthia said firmly. "Just give him a chance, Emma. Please." Emma glanced over her shoulder, meeting her mother's eyes. For a brief moment she saw it. The loneliness, the quiet desperation for something to feel like love again. Her heart softened just a bit. "I'll give him a chance," Emma said softly. "But only one." Cynthia nodded, thinking it was a win. But Emma knew better. She had seen men like Derek before, and deep down she knew exactly how this would end. The following week, Derek arrived with a duffel bag and a crooked smile. He stepped into their house like he owned it. He flashed a wide grin, white teeth gleaming, and clapped his hands together like he'd just walked into a luxury hotel. "Nice place," Derek said with a low chuckle, tossing his bag onto the couch. Emma sat cross-legged on the floor, watching with quiet eyes. The dog sat beside her as if sensing her unease. "Hey Emma," Derek said with a grin. "Your mom says you're a smart one." "Yeah," Emma replied, stone-faced. Derek turned on the TV and flipped to a football game. Cynthia hadn't even said hello to Emma when she got home, but she'd already brought Derek a glass of iced tea. "Don't just sit there, Emma," Cynthia said, bustling into the kitchen. "Help him get settled." Emma didn't move. She sat still, her eyes never leaving Derek. "Guess I'm here to stay, huh?" Derek said, eyes glued to the TV. Emma's gaze hardened. "Not if I have anything to say about it." Derek glanced at her then, his smile faltering. For a brief moment, his eyes darkened, sharp and calculating, like a predator sizing up its prey. Emma didn't flinch. "Looks like we're gonna be good friends," Derek said, his smile returning, but this time it didn't reach his eyes. Emma knew better. The hum of the ceiling fan did little to push away the thick, humid air hanging in the Reynolds household. The small living room was cluttered with the signs of daily survival: a basket of unfolded laundry, an empty pizza box on the coffee table, and an old TV blaring the midday news. Derek lay sprawled on the couch like a king on his throne, a smirk stretched across his face as he scrolled through his phone. His duffel bag, which he promised to unpack tomorrow, still sat at the corner of the room, untouched. Emma sat at the kitchen table, eyes darting from the biology textbook in front of her to Derek's lazy sprawl on the couch. Every click of his phone felt like nails on a chalkboard. Her pencil tapped furiously against the table, each tap louder than the last. "You know, if you're gonna live here, maybe you should try actually helping," she said without looking up. Derek glanced at her, his face blank for a moment before it twisted into a grin. "I am helping. I'm boosting morale," he said, stretching his arms over his head. "Yeah, well, morale looks pretty low from where I'm sitting," Emma muttered, scribbling down notes in the margin of her textbook. Derek laughed, loud and sharp, like he'd just heard the punchline to a joke no one else found funny. "Don't be mad, 'cause I'm smarter than work, kid. You'll figure it out one day." Emma's jaw tightened. She gripped her pencil harder but didn't reply. Every part of her wanted to snap back, but she'd learned that feeding Derek's ego only made him louder. "Emma?" Cynthia's voice called from down the hall. The sound of footsteps shuffled closer until her mom appeared, carrying a basket of clean laundry. Her face was tired, her eyes half-lidded from another long shift at the diner. "I asked you to fold these clothes." Emma blinked, her mouth slightly agape. "I'm studying, Mom." "Well, you can study after," Cynthia said, setting the basket on the chair beside Emma. Her eyes flicked to Derek, still slumped on the couch. She sighed, then her face softened. Derek's had a long day. Let him rest. Emma froze, slowly turning her head to face Cynthia. "Are you serious?" "Emma," Cynthia said, that warning edge in her voice, "just fold the clothes, please. You know how I hate messes." Emma's eyes shifted to Derek, who threw her a wink. He didn't even bother hiding it. Her fingers dug into the fabric of the first shirt she pulled from the basket, her heart pounding in her chest. Her mom didn't see it. She didn't want to see it. The next evening, Emma returned home from school exhausted and starving. She had stayed late for her volunteer shift at the animal shelter, cleaning cages and administering medication under the guidance of the head veterinarian, Dr. Reynolds, no relation. Her uniform still smelled faintly of antiseptic and dog shampoo. The smell of something warm and delicious hit her as she walked into the house. Her stomach grumbled in anticipation. Finally, something good today, she thought. She opened the fridge and froze. The plate of leftovers she had saved for herself, spaghetti with garlic bread, was gone. Empty. The plate sat on the counter, bare except for a few red smudges of sauce. Her heart sank into her stomach, rage bubbling right behind it. She whipped around to see Derek sitting at the kitchen table, leaning back in his chair like he owned the place, picking his teeth with a toothpick. "Was it good?" she asked, her voice dangerously calm. Derek glanced up, raising an eyebrow. "Huh? My dinner?" she said, fists clenched at her sides. "You ate it? All that?" "Yeah, I thought it was up for grabs." He tossed the toothpick into the trash like he'd just made a game-winning shot. "You snooze, you lose, kid." Her chest burned with anger. She wasn't a kid. She wasn't snoozing. That was her dinner. "You knew it was mine, Derek," she snapped. "I put my name on it." "Name or not, it's food," he said with a shrug, leaning forward. "You're acting like I stole your bank account or something." "It's about respect." Emma's voice rose, her face flushed red. "You don't respect anyone but yourself." "What's going on?" Cynthia's voice cut through the air like a whip. She stepped in from the hall, her hands on her hips, eyes darting between them. "Why are you two yelling?" Emma spun around, her breath short. "He ate my dinner, Mom. The one I saved for after work." Cynthia glanced at Derek, who slouched with a pitiful frown. "I didn't know it was her dinner," Derek said, putting on his best innocent face. "I thought it was just leftovers." "You knew," Emma hissed, glaring at him. "Don't act dumb now." "Enough, Emma," Cynthia snapped, turning on her. "He made a mistake. Let it go." "Let it go," Emma said, her voice cracking from disbelief. "He's been making mistakes since he moved in. He's lazy, he eats my food, and now you're defending him like he's the one being wronged." "That's enough," Cynthia said, sharper this time. "He's doing his best. You've had it out for him since day one, and I'm tired of it. You're acting like a jealous child." Emma's heart sank, hurt replacing her anger in an instant. She stared at her mother, mouth open in shock. "I'm not." "Go to your room," Cynthia said, pointing toward the hallway. "I'm done with this." For a moment, Emma stood there, staring at her mother like she didn't recognize her anymore. Finally, she turned on her heel and marched to her room. She slammed the door harder than she meant to, but she didn't care. Her head hit the pillow and she lay there, staring at the ceiling, her throat tight with the effort of holding back tears. Jealous? How could her mom think that? How could she not see it? The next day at school, Emma sat with Rachel at their usual lunch table. Rachel, her best friend since 5th grade, wore her hair in 2 tight puffs and had the kind of laugh that could make you forget everything bad in the world. "Derek sounds like a walking red flag," Rachel said, crunching on a potato chip. "Can't believe your mom's falling for that." Emma stirred her mashed potatoes with a fork, barely eating. "She doesn't want to see it. She just needs to believe he's the one, you know?" "Yeah, I get it," Rachel said. "But, girl, you've got bigger things to think about. Like getting into vet school. Forget Derek." Emma leaned back in her chair, letting her eyes wander to the bulletin board. Flyers for clubs, sports teams, and scholarship deadlines stared back at her. Her eyes locked on one that read scholarship opportunity for veterinary sciences. Rachel noticed her staring. "That you?" Emma nodded slowly. "Yeah, that's me." That evening, Emma came home to find Derek on the couch again, feet on the table, eating chips straight from the bag. Cynthia was cooking in the kitchen. "Hey, Emma," Cynthia called without turning around. "Can you take out the trash? Derek's back is bothering him." Emma stopped mid-step. "His back?" She stared at Derek, who glanced up with a slow grin. "Yeah, back's been feeling a little off," Derek said, cracking his neck. "Unbelievable," Emma muttered. "Emma, the trash," Cynthia repeated, this time sharper. Emma took a deep breath, her fingers twitching with the urge to fight back. But she didn't. Not this time. She grabbed the trash bag, yanked it free, and walked past Derek, who raised his soda can like he was toasting her. Her grip on the trash bag tightened until her knuckles turned white. She stepped outside, her heart pounding harder with every step. This wasn't home anymore. Emma was in her room, headphones on, music cranked up just loud enough to drown out the droning sound of the TV from the living room. Her eyes scanned the page of her biology textbook, underlining key terms like endothermic and metabolism for the upcoming quiz. It wasn't much, but focusing on animals, on science, gave her peace. The world outside her door was noisy, unpredictable, and messy. But that peace didn't last. The door to her room swung open without warning. No knock. No announcement. Derek strolled in like he owned the place, his eyes scanning her shelves like he was looking for something valuable. Emma yanked off her headphones, her heart pounding in her chest. "What are you doing?" she snapped, standing up from her bed. "Relax," Derek said, tossing a lazy grin over his shoulder. "Just looking for the phone charger I left in here." "You never left a charger in here," she said, stepping toward him. "And you don't get to walk in like that. This is my room." Derek turned slowly, his grin dropping into something colder. "Your room? In this house?" He looked her up and down like she was being ridiculous. "You got a job paying rent I don't know about?" "Don't pull that," she shot back, her voice tight and sharp. "I don't care if you're dating my mom. You don't get to treat me like I'm nothing." "Spoiled brat," Derek muttered under his breath as he walked past her, knocking her shoulder with his as he passed. "You think you're so grown. You ain't." Her blood boiled. "Say that again, Derek," she said, spinning around to face him. "Say it to my face." He stopped in the doorway, glanced at her over his shoulder, and smirked. Spoiled brat. He didn't even wait for her reaction. He walked down the hall and out of sight, his footsteps heavy on the creaky wood floor. Emma stood there, fists clenched so tight her nails dug into her palms. Her whole body shook with anger. She slammed the door and locked it this time, her breath coming in short bursts. Her mind was racing. He has to go. He has to go. He has to go. But no matter how many times she thought it, it wouldn't change the fact that Derek wasn't going anywhere. Later that night, Cynthia came home smelling of onion rings and burnt coffee, the sense of the diner she worked at for 12 hours straight. Her eyes were heavy, her posture slouched, but she still mustered a smile for Derek as he greeted her with open arms. "There's my favorite girl," Derek said, giving her a hug that lasted a few seconds too long. "You worked too hard, baby. You deserve to relax." "Tell me about it," Cynthia sighed, dropping her purse onto the counter. She glanced at Emma, who was setting plates for dinner. "You okay, Em?" "No," Emma said flatly. She didn't look at Cynthia. She didn't have to. Her hands moved quickly as she set down forks and napkins, keeping herself busy so she wouldn't have to see Derek's smug face. Cynthia frowned. "What's wrong now?" Emma glanced at Derek, who was suddenly staring at the TV with the intensity of a man trying not to hear the conversation. "He came into my room," she said, pointing at him. "Walked in like he owned it. No knock. Nothing." Cynthia sighed, pinching the bridge of her nose. "Derek?" she called, her tone a mix of exhaustion and warning. "Didn't know I needed a permission slip to grab a phone charger," Derek said, not taking his eyes off the screen. "You don't have a charger in my room and you know it," Emma shot back. "Maybe I did, maybe I didn't," Derek said with a shrug. "Ain't that deep, kid. Let it go." Emma slammed her hand on the table, making the plates rattle. "It's not about the charger, Derek. It's about respect. Something you clearly don't have." "Emma?" Cynthia barked, her eyes wide with disbelief. "Don't start this. He's not the enemy." Emma froze, her breath caught in her throat. "Yes, Mom. He's disrespectful. He walks all over you and me and you're just letting him." "You don't know what you're talking about," Cynthia snapped. "You've had a problem with every boyfriend I've ever had. You don't want me to be happy." Emma's eyes burned and she felt that sting in her chest, the sharp one that hit right before you start to cry. "That's not true," she said, her voice trembling. "I just don't want you to end up with another loser. You deserve better, Mom." Cynthia's eyes narrowed. "That's enough, Emma?" "No, it's not," Emma said, her voice louder than she'd meant it to be. Her vision blurred with angry tears, but she didn't care. "If you love him so much, then you don't need me here." The room went dead silent. The words hung in the air like smoke from a fire. Cynthia's eyes flickered with something, pain, anger, or maybe just exhaustion, but she didn't look away. "Then maybe you should leave if you hate it here so much," Cynthia said softly, each word like a knife. Emma blinked. Her heart stopped. For a second she thought she'd heard it wrong. But Cynthia's face was hard as stone. She meant it. Her breath hitched, and without a second thought, she stormed to her room, her feet thudding hard on the floor. She didn't pack much. Her backpack. A few clothes. Her wallet. Her heart was pounding so hard she could barely think. Derek's voice echoed from the kitchen. "Guess she took that personally." His laugh grated her nerves like sandpaper. She threw her backpack over her shoulder and marched to the front door. Cynthia was still standing by the kitchen counter, her arms folded. She watched Emma with tired, distant eyes, like she was too drained to stop her. Emma hesitated. Part of her waited for her mom to say, "Wait, come back." To say, "I'm sorry." But she didn't. She gripped the doorknob, biting down hard on her lip to keep from crying. The air felt too thick to breathe. The door swung open. She stepped out into the cold night air, shivering as the breeze hit her skin. She glanced back one last time. Her mom was still there, still not moving. Not calling her back. Emma shut the door behind her. The sound of it clicking shut was louder than it should have been. Emma sat on the edge of Rachel's bed that night, her face buried in her hands. Rachel sat beside her, cross-legged, her hand rubbing circles on Emma's back. "You can stay here, Em," Rachel said softly. "I'll tell my mom you got kicked out and she'll be on your side. You know she's all about protecting daughters." "Thanks, Rach," Emma muttered into her hands. Her voice was hoarse from holding in sobs. She had cried earlier, not in front of her mom, not in front of Derek, but once she got to Rachel's room, she crumbled like a sandcastle under a wave. She wiped her face on her sleeve. "I can't stay long though. Your mom's nice, but I don't want to be a burden." Rachel sat up straighter, putting her hands on her hips. "Girl, you are not a burden." She pointed at Emma like she was scolding her. "Say it. Right now." Emma smiled weakly, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm not a burden." "That's right," Rachel said, leaning back like she'd won a battle. Later that night, Emma lay on the mattress Rachel had set up on the floor, staring at the ceiling. Her heart still hurt. Her mind still buzzed with everything her mom had said. But she had one clear thought. She pulled out her phone, scrolled through her contacts and hit call on her grandfather Walter's number. The phone rang once, twice. Then came his familiar, gravelly voice. "Emma?" he said, surprised. "Everything okay, kiddo?" Her throat tightened, but she managed to speak. "Can I stay with you for a while, Grandpa?" There was no hesitation. "Of course you can, sweetheart." For the first time that day, Emma felt the tightness in her chest loosen, if only just a little. The bus ride to Walter's farm was long and quiet, the kind of quiet that forces you to sit with your thoughts. Emma sat by the window, her backpack pressed against her chest. The world outside shifted from cramped neighborhoods to open fields and distant hills, the air growing clearer with every mile. Her eyes followed the rise and fall of the landscape, but her mind stayed trapped on the last thing her mom had said. "Then maybe you should leave if you hate it here so much." Her heart still ached. She tried to convince herself she didn't care. "I'm better off. I'm better off." But no matter how many times she repeated it, the hurt stayed. When the bus pulled up to the gravel lot at the edge of town, Walter was already there. He stood tall, with broad shoulders and a gentle smile beneath a salt and pepper beard. His denim overalls were stained from a day's work, but his eyes were bright and warm as he spotted her. "Emma," he called, waving big like she was the only person in the world. Her chest loosened and a smile tugged at her lips. She hopped off the bus, her feet crunching against the gravel, and ran to him. "Hey, Grandpa," she said, hugging him tight. She didn't care if it looked childish. He squeezed her back, his strong arms wrapping around her like a shield from everything she'd been carrying. "There she is," he said, his voice low and steady like a drumbeat. "Knew you'd come to the right place." "Yeah," she muttered into his shoulder. "Me too." Walter's farm sat at the end of a long dirt road, framed by wide fields of tall grass swaying in the breeze. The white farmhouse had a wraparound porch with an old rocking chair creaking softly in the wind. It wasn't much, but it felt like something solid. A place that had seen storms and still stood strong. Inside, the smell of fresh bread and something fried filled the air. Emma's stomach grumbled. "Go on, sit," Walter said, waving her toward the kitchen table. "I've got biscuits in the oven and you're in luck. I made chicken fried steak." Emma laughed, her eyes watering as she sat down. It wasn't just the food. It was the way he said it, like she'd been missing for years and he'd been saving this meal just for her. She didn't realize how starved she was for that feeling. While Walter moved around the kitchen, grabbing plates and clinking silverware, Emma watched him. His movements were slow but deliberate, like every step had a purpose. It was the kind of patience you only get from years of working with animals and land. When he set the plate in front of her, she didn't wait. The first bite was heaven. Crispy, salty, warm, all the things she needed but didn't realize. She chewed slowly, savoring it. "Tastes good?" he asked, his eyes crinkling with that grandpa smile. "Best meal I've had in forever," Emma admitted, and she meant it. They ate in comfortable silence for a while, just the sound of forks against plates and the soft creak of the floorboards as the house settled. Felt like home. Not the place she left. Not the cramped kitchen with Derek's voice booming from the living room. This was different. After dinner, Walter leaned back in his chair, tapping his fingers on the edge of the table. His eyes studied her carefully, like he was trying to see beyond what she told him on the phone. "So," he said, "you want to tell me what's got you running all the way out here?" Emma swallowed hard, setting her fork down. "It's Derek," she muttered, looking at her plate. "Mom's boyfriend." "Ah," Walter said knowingly, nodding slowly. "He the type that thinks he's king of the castle?" Her eyes flicked to him, surprised. "Yeah, that's exactly it." Walter let out a low hum, leaning forward with his elbows on the table. "Men like that," he said, "they got two tricks. First they make you feel small. Then they make you feel like you need 'em." He glanced at her. "Guessin' he tried that on you?" Emma nodded, her throat tight. Walter leaned back again, eyes distant like he was remembering something. "You know, sometimes when the world throws you out, it's only so you can find where you're meant to be." He met her eyes then, his gaze steady. "Maybe you're right where you're supposed to be now, kiddo." Emma blinked hard. She wasn't gonna cry. Not now. Not here. "Yeah," she said, her voice small but firm. "Maybe I am." The next morning, the rooster's crow came like a blast of sound through the window. Emma sat up, groggy but not annoyed. For once, she wasn't waking up to the thumping of Derek's heavy boots or her mom's voice calling for her to hurry up. This was different. Her window looked out over the pasture, where the sun was just rising over the horizon. It painted the sky with soft pinks and golds, and the fields shimmered with morning dew. It was quiet, peaceful. She didn't want to look away. But Walter's voice echoed up the stairs. "Come on, Emma. Animals don't feed themselves." She grinned. "No rest for the farmers, huh?" She threw on a pair of old jeans and a hoodie and met Walter by the barn. The smell of hay and dirt hit her, and instead of being grossed out, she breathed it in deeply. "First things first," Walter said, handing her a small metal pail. "Feed the chickens. They'll act like you haven't fed them in a year, but don't let them fool you." Emma followed him to the chicken coop, her eyes wide with curiosity. The chickens clucked and squawked as soon as she approached. Walter wasn't kidding. "They know you're new," Walter said with a chuckle. "But you'll get the hang of it." As Emma scattered feed, the chickens darted around her feet, pecking the ground in a frenzy. She laughed, the sound of it light and fresh, like something she hadn't felt in a long time. From that point on, the day rolled forward. Watering plants, feeding the goats, brushing down the old mare, Willow, who had big brown eyes and a calmness Emma instantly loved. Every task Walter handed her wasn't just work, it was purpose. For the first time in a long time, Emma didn't feel like she was in anyone's way. That night, after dinner, Walter brought out 2 mugs of hot chocolate and set them on the porch table. The crickets chirped and the stars stretched out across the sky. It was quiet in a way she didn't know she needed. "You know, when I was your age, I thought family was supposed to be perfect," Walter said, his voice low and thoughtful. "Turns out, family's just people. Some of them let you down. Some of them surprise you." Emma nodded, her fingers wrapped around the warm mug. "But here's the thing," he added, looking at her directly. "You don't gotta carry all their mistakes. Just 'cause they stumbled, that don't mean you have to." His words hit her harder than she expected. Her eyes burned, but she kept them on the sky. "Don't cry, Emma." "Yeah," she said softly. "I know." "You're gonna be all right, kid," he said, patting her on the back. "You're stronger than you think." That night, when she lay in bed, she felt something she hadn't felt in weeks, safe. The quiet hum of the farm wasn't just noise. It was home. Not the house she came from. Not Derek's domain. This was her place now. Her mind drifted to Willow, the horse she brushed earlier, and the way the goat kept nudging her to play. She thought about how Dr. Reynolds, back at the shelter, said she had a natural way with animals. Her eyes closed slowly, and for the first time in weeks, she slept soundly. No TV noise. No arguments. Just the hum of crickets and the warmth of knowing she belonged. The days at Walter's farm settled into a peaceful rhythm. The world beyond the farm seemed to shrink, like it didn't matter anymore. Every morning, Emma woke up to the gentle glow of sunrise over the fields. The sound of chickens clucking, the distant bleat of goats, and the slow, steady sway of the tall grass became her morning soundtrack. Her days were full of work, but not the exhausting, draining kind. It was the kind that left her hands dirty, her legs tired, but her heart full. Every task had a purpose, feeding the animals, mending fences, or tending to the garden. Walter was always nearby, offering a guiding word or showing her how to do something new. Use firm hands when brushing a horse, he'd say. Animals know when you're nervous and they'll be nervous too. She listened, taking mental notes, and with every day that passed she felt more at home in her own skin. Her favorite part of the day was tending to Willow, the old mare with eyes that seemed to understand everything without a word. Emma talked to Willow while she brushed her coat, sharing her thoughts, frustrations, and hopes like they were old friends. Willow would flick her tail or nudge Emma's arm as if to say, "I hear you, kid." Walter watched her one afternoon as she brushed Willow's mane with long, steady strokes. He leaned on the gate, arms crossed, a proud smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. "You've got it, Emma," he said, his voice carrying over the sounds of the farm. "That calm in your hands, that's something most people never learn." Emma glanced at him, smiling faintly. "Guess I had a good teacher." Walter chuckled, his laugh slow and full of warmth. "Maybe. But some things you're just born with." One evening after dinner, Walter and Emma sat on the front porch, watching the sun dip below the horizon. Fireflies blinked in and out of view, their glow soft and fleeting. Walter held a glass of sweet tea in one hand, tapping his fingers slowly on the glass like he was deep in thought. "You know," Walter said suddenly, his eyes still on the horizon, "I used to think success was about getting more. More land, more money, more everything." He sipped his tea, his eyes distant. "Spent a lot of years chasing it. Thought if I had more, I'd finally be enough." Emma tilted her head, curious. Walter didn't talk about his past much. "What changed?" she asked softly. He turned to her, his gaze steady but filled with something deeper. Regret, maybe, or wisdom earned the hard way. "I lost people," he said simply. "People I didn't realize I needed until they were gone." He sighed and leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "I never knew how much I had until it was gone." He glanced at her, his eyes sharper than before. "Don't wait that long to realize your worth, Emma." The weight of his words settled on her like a blanket, warm and heavy. She didn't reply, but she didn't have to. She understood. That night, as she lay in bed staring at the ceiling, his words echoed in her mind. "Don't wait that long to realize your worth." She closed her eyes, holding the words close like a secret promise. The next morning started like any other. The air smelled of fresh dew and hay. The rooster's call echoed through the fields. Emma rolled out of bed, stretching her arms high above her head. Her muscles ached in that satisfying way that comes from hard work. She pulled on her jeans and hoodie, ready for another day on the farm. As she passed the kitchen, she noticed it was quiet. The smell of coffee was missing, a small but strange absence. Usually, Walter was up before her, already stirring sugar into his mug. "Grandpa?" she called, stepping into the living room. Her heart thudded once, hard and fast, but she brushed it off. "He's probably outside already." But then she saw him. Walter sat in his favorite chair by the window, his head tilted slightly to the side like he'd fallen asleep watching the sunrise. The sun spilled in through the window, lighting up his face in soft gold. His hands rested on the armrest, still and calm. "Grandpa." Emma's voice broke as she stepped closer. Her pulse quickened. "Grandpa, wake up." He didn't move. Her hands shook as she reached out, placing her hand on his arm. It was warm, but he didn't stir. Her fingers pressed gently against his wrist, searching for a pulse. "Nothing." "Grandpa," she whispered, her voice cracking. "Grandpa, come on." She shook him lightly, tears filling her eyes so fast she couldn't stop them. Her breaths came short and sharp, her chest tight with panic. "No, no, no. Not today. Not today." Her heart knew, but her mind wasn't ready to believe it. She fumbled for her phone, her fingers numb as she dialed 911. The paramedics arrived 20 minutes later, but Emma already knew what they'd say. She stood on the porch, hugging herself tightly as they entered the house. Their faces were kind but somber. One of them, a woman with kind eyes, placed a hand on Emma's shoulder. "He passed in his sleep," the woman said gently. It was peaceful. No pain. Her words were meant to comfort, but they didn't. Emma nodded numbly, her throat too tight to speak. After the paramedics left, she wandered back inside. The house was quiet in a way it had never been before. It didn't feel peaceful. It felt hollow. She stood in the middle of the kitchen, her eyes drifting from the empty coffee pot to the chair by the window. Her legs gave out. She sank to the floor, her arms wrapped around her knees as sobs racked her body. She pressed her face against her arms, crying so hard she could barely breathe. It wasn't fair. None of it was fair. She stayed there for what felt like hours, her chest heaving with every breath. The world outside kept moving, Chickens clucked, a bird chirped, and somewhere far off, a goat let out a bleat. Eventually she stood up. Her hands wiped at her face, smudging dirt and tears together on her cheeks. Her eyes felt raw, but she walked toward the barn, her steps slow but steady. Willow was there, her big brown eyes watching Emma quietly. Emma pressed her forehead against Willow's neck, closing her eyes. "He's gone," she whispered. Willow nudged her gently, and Emma took it as a sign that she was heard. The day of Walter's funeral was cold and gray. The sky hung low, clouds thick like a heavy blanket pressing down on the world. Emma wore a black dress she borrowed from Rachel. People came. Old neighbors, farmhands, and folks from town. Some cried. Some hugged her. But Emma barely heard them. Her eyes stayed on the casket, her heart aching in ways she didn't have words for. When it was over, people left in pairs, their cars rolling down the dirt road one by one. Emma stayed by the grave until it was just her, the wind, and the soft rustle of leaves. "Didn't think it'd feel like this," she said softly, her voice swallowed up by the air. "Didn't think you'd leave me like this, Grandpa." Her chest tightened, but she didn't cry. Not this time. She stayed there a little while longer before finally turning to leave. As she reached the bottom of the hill, a man in a suit stood waiting by his car. She recognized him from town, Mr. Grady, Walter's lawyer. "Emma," he said, nodding with a kind smile. "I'm sorry for your loss." "Thanks," she muttered, her hands shoved into her coat pockets. "What's up?" He glanced at the grave behind her, his face thoughtful. "There's something we need to discuss," he said carefully. "Your grandfather left instructions for me in his will." Emma's heart thudded once, slow and deep. She blinked, confused. "What instructions?" Mr. Grady glanced at her, his eyes soft but serious. "Why don't you come by my office tomorrow?" he said. It's important." Emma nodded slowly, unsure of what he meant. But deep down she had a feeling that her life was about to change. Again. The hum of the air conditioner filled the lawyer's office with a low, steady buzz. Emma sat stiffly in the leather chair, her eyes darting around the room. The walls were lined with framed degrees and certificates, and Mr. Grady's desk was far too clean for her liking. It made everything feel too serious, too final. Her hands fidgeted in her lap, fingers curling and uncurling the hem of her hoodie sleeve. Her heart was still heavy from the funeral, and she wasn't ready for whatever this meeting was supposed to be. Mr. Grady sat across from her, a man with sharp features and thin rectangular glasses perched at the edge of his nose. He tapped a stack of papers into a neat pile, his face a mask of professionalism. "Thanks for coming in, Emma," he said, glancing up at her over his glasses. She gave a small shrug, her throat too tight to speak. "I know it's been a rough week for you," he continued, his voice softer now. "I'll get straight to it. Your grandfather had a will." He set the papers in front of him, sliding a few pages aside until he found what he was looking for. And in that will, he made some very specific requests regarding his estate. Emma's brow furrowed. Estate? That word felt too big, too official for the simple farm she'd known all her life. "What requests?" she asked, her voice low and cautious. Mr. Grady took a breath, glancing at her like he was about to say something that might knock her off balance. "Your grandfather left the farm to you, Emma?" Her heart skipped. Her eyes snapped up to meet his. "To me?" He nodded, leaning forward slightly. "Yes. The house, the land, the livestock, everything. It's all yours." Emma blinked, her mouth opening and closing as she struggled to form words. Her brain felt like it had been tossed in a blender. "But I'm only 17. Can you even leave a farm to a 17-year-old? Mr. Grady gave a small smile. "Yes, under certain conditions. You'll be the legal owner, but I'll act as the trustee until you turn 18. Essentially, you'll be in control of it day to day, but any major financial decisions will have to go through me until your birthday." Emma leaned back, letting the words sink in. "The farm is mine. It's mine." She'd always thought of it as Walter's farm, but now it wasn't just Walter's anymore. Her breath hitched in her chest. "Why would he do that?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "Why me?" Mr. Grady tilted his head, his eyes kind but firm. "I think he saw something in you, Emma. The way you cared for the animals, the way you handled the work without complaint. He believed you were capable." He leaned forward, folding his hands on the desk. In his words, "Emma's got the heart of a farmer and the soul of a leader. He wanted you to have the chance to build something of your own." Her eyes stung with tears. Of course he'd say that. Walter always had a way of seeing parts of her she hadn't seen in herself. She nodded slowly, pressing her lips together as she tried to steady her breathing. "Okay," she muttered. Okay. But Mr. Grady wasn't finished. He flipped to another page in the will. That's not all, Emma? She sat up straighter, her brow furrowing deeper. What do you mean? Mr. Grady glanced at the paper, tapping it with his finger. Walter also inherited a significant number of shares in a food company from a friend of his years ago. It looks like he never mentioned it to anyone. Those shares have been collecting dividends for years, and according to the records, they're worth quite a bit now. Her heart thudded against her ribs. Food company? Shares? Dividends? These words sounded foreign, like something from a business documentary. How much is quite a bit? She asked slowly. Mr. Grady leaned back, folding his hands over his stomach. Roughly $750,000 in shares, give or take, depending on market fluctuations. The room tilted. Her hands gripped the armrests, her breathing shallow. 750,000? Correct, he said calmly, like he was discussing the weather. It's not cash, but if you ever wanted to sell the shares, that's the ballpark of what they'd be worth. And, of course, the dividends from the past 5 years are also payable to you. That's about $50,000 in a separate account. Emma stared at him, her eyes wide, her pulse hammering in her ears. You're kidding. I assure you I'm not. Her heart felt like it was going to leap out of her chest. The farm was one thing. She could understand the farm. The dirt, the animals, the house, she could touch those things. But this? Stocks and shares and money in the 6 figures? It didn't feel real. I don't know anything about that stuff, she admitted, her voice small. That's all right, Mr. Grady said, his smile gentle but firm. You don't have to know everything today. I'll help you. We'll set up financial advisors, make sure you're making decisions with the right people in your corner. Emma nodded slowly, but her mind was still spinning. A farm, a house, $750,000 in shares, and $50,000 in cash. Felt like too much too fast. Why would Walter trust me with all this? I don't know if I'm ready for this, she muttered, rubbing her hands together nervously. Walter believed you were, Mr. Grady said, his voice firmer now. And if he believed it, I'd bet on it too. She looked up at him, her eyes still filled with doubt but also something else, a flicker of determination. Walter had believed in her, even when she wasn't sure of herself. He had seen something in her that she hadn't seen in herself. Maybe it was time she started seeing it too. Back at the farm, Emma sat on the porch steps, her eyes focused on the field stretching out before her. The sun was just beginning to set, washing the grass in orange and gold. The sky felt big, endless. Her mind buzzed with everything Mr. Grady had told her. The farm is mine. The words felt strange but powerful. She glanced at her hands, still calloused from days of farm work. She thought about the horses, the goats, and even the noisy chickens. They were all hers now. She spotted Willow near the fence, her long tail swishing lazily as she grazed. Emma smiled to herself, wiping her hands on her jeans. She got up and walked toward the mare, her steps slow and steady. Willow glanced up as Emma approached. The old horse's eyes were calm and steady, watching her with quiet patience. Emma reached out a hand, her fingers brushing gently along Willow's mane. I'm not gonna let him down, Emma said softly, stroking the horse's neck. Her voice grew stronger with every word. I'm not gonna let anyone down. Willow snorted softly, nudging her arm with her nose. Emma grinned, shaking her head. Yeah, I hear you. She stood there for a long time, her eyes on the horizon. This is mine now. Not Cynthia's. Not Derek's. Not anybody else's. Just hers. Walter's words came back to her. Don't wait that long to realize your worth. Her fingers curled gently into Willow's mane, her jaw set firm. I won't, she promised. Not anymore. The morning air at the farm was crisp and cool. Emma stood by the chicken coop, tossing out feed, her eyes distant. The clucks and pecks of the hens surrounded her, but she wasn't really hearing them. Her mind was somewhere else, replaying Mr. Grady's words from last night's phone call. Your mother and Derek have filed a petition to contest the will, he'd said, his voice steady but serious. They're claiming undue influence. Emma's jaw had tightened then, her eyes narrowing at the words. Undue influence. The implication was clear. They were saying she'd manipulated Walter. It was laughable. She had never asked him for anything but a place to stay. Her breath fogged the cool air as she emptied the last of the feed. The chickens darted around her feet, but she barely noticed. Cynthia. Derek. She should have seen it coming. Derek was greedy and Cynthia was too stubborn to see it. Later that day, Emma sat at the kitchen table, her phone pressed to her ear. Mr. Grady's voice was calm on the other end as always. We'll fight it, he said simply. They'll have to prove it in court, and I'm telling you now, Emma, they won't be able to. Walter's will was properly witnessed, properly signed, and properly notarized. They don't have a case. Emma leaned forward, her fingers pressed against her temple. They're still gonna try, she muttered, bitterness thick in her voice. Derek's not the type to let it go. No, he's not, Mr. Grady agreed. But you've got something he doesn't. What's that? The truth, he said plainly. And that's enough. The courthouse smelled like old paper and fresh coffee. Emma sat on one side of the room, her heart thudding in her chest as she stared straight ahead. Mr. Grady sat next to her, adjusting his tie and offering her a nod of reassurance. On the other side of the room sat Cynthia and Derek. Cynthia wore a simple navy blue blouse, her eyes darting nervously around the room. Derek, on the other hand, sat back in his chair with his arms draped over the sides, grinning like he'd already won. Emma gritted her teeth, her fingers curling into fists on her lap. He looked so sure of himself. That grin, that smug, self-satisfied grin, it made her blood boil. The bailiff called the courtroom to order. Everyone stood as the judge entered, a tall woman with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense expression. She took her seat at the bench, flipping through the case file. This is the case of Cynthia Reynolds and Derek Mason contesting the will of Walter Reynolds, the judge said, her eyes scanning the papers. The claimant's alleged undue influence was involved in the creation of this will. Is that correct? Cynthia hesitated, her eyes flicking to Derek. He gave her a slight nod. Yes, Your Honor, Cynthia said, her voice quieter than usual. Emma shook her head slowly, her lips pressed into a tight line. All right, the judge continued. Mr. Grady, as the executor of this will, do you have a statement before we proceed? Mr. Grady rose smoothly, buttoning his jacket. Yes, Your Honor. We maintain that Walter Reynolds' will was created voluntarily and properly executed. We believe the claim of undue influence is entirely baseless. The judge raised an eyebrow, her gaze shifting to Derek and Cynthia. Very well. Claimants, you may present your case. Derek stood, straightening his collar like he was getting ready for a performance. He glanced around the courtroom as if he were speaking to an audience. Your Honor, Derek said, his voice smooth and confident. I think it's pretty obvious what happened here. Walter was an old man. Old men get lonely. They get confused. And Emma? He pointed at her like she was a criminal. She's smart. Real smart. Smart enough to know how to play the part of the good granddaughter. She knew exactly what she was doing. Emma's eyes flashed with anger, but she stayed quiet. Mr. Grady had warned her not to react, no matter what Derek said. She was always in his ear, Derek continued, pacing a little now. Bringing him coffee, helping with the animals, acting all sweet. Of course he'd give her everything. She tricked him into it. He folded his arms, his eyes landing on the judge with that same smug grin. All I'm asking is for my girlfriend to get her fair share. Cynthia shifted in her seat, her hands twisting in her lap. The judge's sharp eyes locked on Derek. And you, Mr. Mason, are not a relative of the deceased, correct? Derek's grin faltered slightly. Well, no, Your Honor. But I'm here for Cynthia, who's Walter's daughter. The judge's lips pressed into a thin line. She glanced at Cynthia. Do you have anything to add, Ms. Reynolds? Cynthia's eyes darted toward Derek, searching for something in his face. He won't save you, Mom, Emma thought bitterly. He's just using you. Cynthia's voice trembled and she lowered her head. I just think Emma shouldn't have it all, Your Honor. Walter was my father. I think I deserve something too. Emma felt her heart clench. Deserve? After everything? She sat straighter in her chair, jaw tight. You didn't even show up for him. I did. The judge nodded slowly, her eyes scanning both sides. Thank you, Ms. Reynolds. Mr. Grady, you may respond. Mr. Grady stood, his steps slow and deliberate. His calm voice filled the room like a steady drumbeat. Your Honor, Walter Reynolds made his intentions clear. His will was signed, witnessed, and notarized according to state law. The claimants argue that Emma manipulated him, but they've provided no evidence to support this. He turned to face the judge directly. Furthermore, I'd like to point out that Walter's relationship with his daughter, Cynthia Reynolds, was strained for years. Walter chose to leave his farm and assets to the one person who stood by him, helped him, and shared his vision for the future, Emma. He turned, gesturing toward Emma with an open palm. Walter believed in her. And I believe the court should too. Silence filled the room. The judge folded her hands on the bench, her eyes piercing through Derek and Cynthia. Her gaze lingered on Cynthia, who couldn't meet her eyes. The law is clear. the judge said, her voice cutting through the silence. This court finds no evidence of undue influence. The will is valid, and Emma Reynolds is the sole beneficiary. Emma's breath caught in her chest. Her fingers pressed hard into the fabric of her jeans. I won. Court is adjourned, the judge said, banging her gavel once. Outside the courthouse, Emma stood at the bottom of the steps, breathing in the cool air. Mr. Grady patted her on the shoulder. You did good, kid, he said. I'll follow up with the court to get the paperwork finalized. Thanks, Mr. Grady, Emma said quietly, her gaze fixed on the street. Her eyes shifted as Cynthia and Derek walked past her. Derek didn't look at her, his face set in a hard scowl. But Cynthia did. She stopped for a moment, looking at Emma like she wanted to say something. But whatever it was, she didn't say it. Mom, Emma said softly, her voice barely audible. Cynthia paused, her eyes darting back to Derek, who was walking ahead. Then she looked back at Emma. For a second, Emma thought she might say I'm sorry. She thought maybe her mom would reach out to her, offer something, anything. But Cynthia just turned and walked away. Emma's chest felt hollow, but she didn't cry. Not this time. Her eyes stayed locked on her mother's back until she disappeared down the street. Mr. Grady glanced at her. You all right? Emma took a slow breath, her gaze shifting to the horizon. Her heart still ached, but something inside her was different now. Stronger. Yeah, she said, her voice steady. I will be. She turned and walked away, not looking back. The sun was barely peeking over the horizon, casting a soft, golden glow across the fields of the Reynolds farm. Emma stood by the barn door, hands on her hips, breathing in the crisp morning air. The sweet scent of hay mixed with the earthy smell of dew-kissed grass. This was her world now, every inch of it. Her world. It still felt strange to think of it that way. The house, the barn, the fields, and every stubborn, clucking chicken were hers. But with that ownership came responsibility, and some days that weight felt heavier than she'd ever imagined. All right, Willow, Emma said as she brushed the mare's coat, her strokes long and steady. Willow flicked her ears and nudged Emma's side with her nose. Easy, Emma laughed, nudging her back. I'm getting there, girl. Patience. Patience. That word echoed in her mind. It was something Walter had always said. Animals aren't in a rush. They wait. They trust. You can learn a lot from them. Rachel arrived later that morning, pulling up in her mom's old SUV. The car door creaked as she stepped out, pulling a hoodie over her head. Farm life at 6 a.m., Rachel said with mock enthusiasm, yawning as she walked over. I better get free eggs for life for this. Free eggs for life, Emma repeated, smirking as she tossed Rachel a pair of gloves. But only if you earn them. Rachel grinned, slipping on the gloves. All right, boss. What's on the agenda today? Emma glanced at her notebook, flipping through the pages she'd been scribbling in all week. We need to reinforce the east side fence, and the goat pen is a mess. Oh, and the vet's coming by to check on Willow's leg. Rachel raised an eyebrow. You scheduled a vet visit? Emma shrugged, her eyes on the barn. Yeah. Figured I should start learning from them now. If I'm gonna be a vet one day, I might as well get some practice. Look at you, Rachel teased, nudging her in the arm. Boss moves. Trying, Emma replied, smiling. A few weeks later, Emma's routine had become a finely tuned rhythm. Wake up before sunrise. Feed the chickens, the goats, and Willow. Fix anything broken. Check on the crops. Answer phone calls from Mr. Grady, who kept her updated on the dividends from her shares. It wasn't easy, and sometimes the stress made her want to curl up and disappear, but every day she got back up. One afternoon, Mr. Grady called with big news. Emma, he said, his voice carrying its usual calm authority. The quarterly dividends from your shares have been processed. You've got $15,000 deposited into your account. Emma nearly dropped the phone. $15,000? She repeated, as if saying it would make it sound more real. Yup, Mr. Grady said. And there will be more every quarter. Her heart pounded in her chest. She'd been saving every dollar she could for one goal, veterinary school. This was her shot. This was how she'd make it happen. Can I use it for tuition? She asked hesitantly, already knowing the answer but needing to hear it anyway. Of course, Mr. Grady said, his tone light with amusement. It's your money, Emma. Spend it wisely, but yes, you can use it for tuition. That night, she sat on her bed with her laptop open, scrolling through the enrollment page for the local veterinary college. Her fingers hovered over the submit payment button. Her heart beat faster, her mind filling with doubts. What if I fail? What if I'm not good enough? Then she heard Walter's voice in her head. Don't wait that long to realize your worth. With a deep breath, Emma clicked the button. Payment processed. She stared at the screen, her eyes welling up with tears. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was moving forward. The farm grew busier as Emma's responsibilities piled up. She hired a farmhand named Ben, a quiet but strong man with a wide-brim hat and a work ethic that rivaled Walter's. "Nice to meet you, Miss Reynolds," Ben said on his first day, shaking her hand firmly. "Heard you're running this place on your own." Emma raised an eyebrow, letting out a soft laugh. "Not on my own," she said, glancing at Rachel, who was struggling to carry a bag of chicken feed across the yard. "Point taken," Ben said, chuckling. "Where do you need me?" From that day on, Ben became an essential part of the farm. He knew how to handle goats better than anyone Emma had ever met. Even Willow, who was known to be picky about new people, took to him instantly. Ben didn't talk much, but when he did, it was usually something thoughtful. One afternoon, while they were repairing the goat pen, he glanced at her and said, "You're doing good, Emma. Your grandpa would be proud." Her hands froze on the hammer. She blinked twice, swallowing hard. "Thanks, Ben," she said quietly. She didn't cry, but his words stayed with her for the rest of the day. With Rachel, Ben, and her growing confidence, Emma started to see the farm differently. It wasn't just work anymore. It was home. It was hers. She made changes, planting more flowers, adding a small sanctuary area for injured animals. It started with a stray dog she found on the road, much like the one she'd rescued months ago. Then came a pair of rabbits a neighbor didn't want anymore. Word spread, and soon people started bringing animals to her doorstep. Abandoned cats, a baby fox with a limp, even a turtle that had been hit by a car. "Emma's animal haven," Rachel joked as she watched Emma bottle feed a baby goat. Emma smiled, the baby goat's tiny hooves pressing against her arms. "Yeah, maybe I'll put up a sign one day." "You should," Rachel said seriously. "People need places like this." Emma didn't say anything, but in her heart, she knew Rachel was right. There were hard days, of course. Some mornings, Emma woke up with her heart so heavy she could barely move. The pressure of everything, school, the farm, the animals, the memory of her mom walking away, it all piled up at once. One of those mornings, she sat on the porch steps, her head in her hands. Her chest ached like something was pressing down on it. She hated that feeling, that small, quiet doubt that whispered, "You can't do this. It's too much. You'll mess it up." But then she remembered Walter's voice. "Don't wait that long to realize your worth." She took a deep breath and lifted her head. The sun was rising slowly, turning the sky a soft pink. The light washed over the fields, lighting up every blade of grass with gold. It was beautiful. It was hers. Her heart didn't feel so heavy anymore. Rachel pulled up in the SUV, honking twice. She stepped out, holding 2 cups of iced coffee. "Break time," she called, holding one out. "You look like you're about to explode." Emma took the cup, letting out a soft laugh. "You have no idea." They sat on the porch steps together, sipping their drinks as the world slowly came to life. The animals stirred in the distance, Willow's soft neighs echoing from the barn. "Hey, Em," Rachel said, nudging her. "You're doing it, you know. All that stuff you said you'd do. Running the farm, starting vet school, helping animals." She raised her cup like a toast. "You're killing it." Emma glanced at her friend, a slow smile growing on her face. She looked out at the farm, the house, and the fields that stretched out as far as she could see. "Yeah," she said softly, her heart full of something warm and steady. "Yeah, I am." The day had started like any other. The sky was clear, the fields were golden under the morning sun, and the air smelled of fresh earth and blooming wildflowers. Emma stood near the barn, tossing hay into Willow's stall. Her movements were steady and sure, her mind calm for once. No calls from lawyers. No surprise bills. Just work. "Hey, Willow," Emma muttered as the mare nuzzled her shoulder, her soft breath warm against Emma's neck. "You think today's gonna be a good day?" Willow let out a soft snort and Emma chuckled. "Yeah, me neither." She didn't know why she'd said that. Things had been good lately. The farm was running smoother than ever, school was tough but manageable, and Rachel had stopped joking about quitting after every long workday. Even Ben, quiet as he was, had mentioned how well the place was coming together. But something about that morning felt off. It wasn't until just after lunch that she saw it. At first, Emma thought it was just her eyes playing tricks on her. A figure walking up the long dirt path leading to the house, dragging a single bag behind them. Her heart thudded in her chest. It wasn't Rachel or Ben, they both had cars. No one walks down that road unless they have nowhere else to go. As the figure got closer, Emma's breath caught in her throat. It was Cynthia. Her mom was wearing a faded hoodie and jeans that looked like they'd been slept in. Her hair, usually styled neatly, hung in loose, uneven curls around her face. Her eyes darted left and right like she was expecting someone to jump out at her. Emma's first instinct was to walk inside and lock the door. No, she doesn't get to walk back in like nothing happened. Her hands clenched into fists at her sides. But then Walter's voice echoed in her head. Patience, Emma. Patience and love will get you through more storms than anger ever will. Her jaw tightened, but she stayed where she was. Cynthia's eyes locked on Emma as she got closer. For a moment they just stared at each other. Emma's heart beat in her ears. Part of her hoped Cynthia would turn around, walk back the way she came. But she didn't. Hey, Cynthia said, her voice hoarse like she'd been crying. She stopped a few feet away, shifting the weight of her bag. Can I come in? Emma raised an eyebrow, crossing her arms over her chest. Depends, she said, her voice sharp but steady. What are you doing here, Mom? Cynthia glanced at the house, then back at Emma, her eyes full of something Emma hadn't seen in years, uncertainty. It's Derek, Cynthia admitted, her voice cracking. He's gone. Packed his stuff and left while I was at work. Her eyes dropped to the ground. Took the last of my savings too. Emma's heart tensed. She should have felt sorry, but all she felt was anger, not just at Derek but at her mom for letting him do it. You let him in. You let him stay. You chose him over me. Guess you finally saw him for what he is, Emma said coldly. Cynthia winced. Her eyes flicked up to meet Emma's, and for the first time, Emma saw how tired she looked. Her face was thinner, her eyes hollow. She didn't look like the strong, stubborn woman Emma grew up with. She looked small. I did, Cynthia muttered. Too late though. Her eyes welled up with tears she didn't bother wiping away. I don't have anywhere else to go, Em. I just need a place to think. Just for a little while. Emma stayed quiet. She knew this moment would come one day. She'd thought about it in the quiet moments, when she was mending fences or brushing Willow's coat. She'd imagined her mom walking up that path looking for mercy. And she'd imagined herself saying no. But now that the moment was here, it didn't feel right. She's still my mom. All right, Emma said, sighing deeply. Cynthia looked up, her eyes full of cautious hope. But, Emma said, raising a hand before Cynthia could thank her. This is my house. My rules. She took a step closer, her eyes sharp as glass. If you're staying, you help. No laying around. No excuses. Her eyes didn't waver. And you're honest with me from now on. No more lies, Mom. Cynthia blinked, surprised. She sniffed, wiping her face quickly with her sleeve. Yeah, she muttered, her voice thick with emotion. Yeah, okay. Deal. Emma glanced down at the bag in Cynthia's hand. Come on, she said, turning toward the house. I'll show you where you can sleep. The first week was tense. Cynthia didn't complain, but she didn't say much either. She stayed quiet during dinner, answered Emma's instructions with nods, and kept to herself. Emma didn't push, but she kept her eyes open. She wasn't going to be caught off guard. At first, Rachel wasn't happy. Why'd you let her stay? Rachel asked one day while they loaded hay into the barn. You think she's gonna change? Emma heaved a bale onto the stack, wiping her brow. No, she admitted. But I'm not doing it for her. I'm doing it for me. Rachel gave her a look. That's deep. Yeah, well, Emma muttered, reaching for another bale. I've had time to think. Over time, the tension started to thaw. Emma noticed it first in the little things. Her mom started cooking dinner without being asked. She folded laundry while Emma was at school. One day, she even fixed the screen door that had been hanging crooked for weeks. It wasn't much, but it was something. One night, Emma found her mom sitting on the porch, gazing at the stars. Emma sat down beside her, resting her elbows on her knees. They didn't talk for a while. Just sat. Nice night, Cynthia said finally, her voice quiet. Yeah, Emma agreed. Silence again. Then Cynthia let out a slow breath. I'm sorry, Em, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. For everything. Emma turned her head, studying her mom's face. She didn't see pity or guilt. Just tired honesty. Thanks, Emma said, her voice softer than she intended. They didn't say anything else after that, but they didn't need to. As the weeks passed, Cynthia started to open up. She told Emma about Derek, how charming he'd been at first, how she ignored every red flag because she was tired of being alone. Loneliness makes you do stupid things, Cynthia said one night as they cleaned up after dinner. Makes you grab onto the wrong person just so you don't feel it. She glanced at Emma, her face open and raw. But it's not worth it. I know that now. Emma didn't say anything. She just nodded. It wasn't forgiveness. Not yet. But it was a start. One evening after a long day of work, Emma and Cynthia sat at the table eating stew. Rachel was scrolling on her phone, feet up on a chair, and Ben sat at the end of the table with his usual quiet presence. The four of them ate in peace, the warm glow of the kitchen light casting soft shadows on the walls. Emma glanced at her mom, who was quietly stirring her stew, her eyes distant but not unhappy. There was a calm in her that hadn't been there before. "Feels like home," Rachel said suddenly, breaking the silence. She glanced around, smiling at the group. "I like it here." Emma leaned back in her chair, gazing around the table. She saw her mom, tired but healing. She saw Rachel, her best friend who never left her side. She saw Ben, steady and reliable. And she saw herself, not a scared 17-year-old runaway anymore, but someone who'd built something from nothing. "Yeah," Emma said, her voice steady and strong. "Me too." The auditorium buzzed with soft murmurs, the hum of anticipation filling the air. Rows of chairs were packed with proud parents, family members and friends. On stage, the dean of the veterinary school adjusted the microphone, his voice echoing across the room. Emma sat among a sea of graduates, the weight of her cap tilted slightly to one side. Her heart pounded in her chest, a mix of nerves and disbelief. This is real. This is actually happening. Her eyes scanned the crowd, finding Rachel, Ben, and to her surprise, Cynthia, all sitting together. Her mom gave a small wave, her smile wide but soft. Emma blinked back a swell of emotion, focusing on the stage as the dean called names. One by one, students rose, walked up the steps, and accepted their diplomas. Each name brought her closer to her own. Then it came. "Emma Reynolds," the dean announced, his voice clear and strong. Her breath caught in her chest, her legs moving before her mind could catch up. The world felt quiet for a second, like everything had slowed. Her steps were steady, but her heart raced with every beat. "I did it. I actually did it." The dean smiled as he handed her the diploma. Emma's fingers gripped it tightly, the weight of the paper heavier than she'd expected. But it wasn't just paper. It was every late night studying, every test she thought she'd fail, every whispered memory of Walter telling her she was strong. "Congratulations, Ms. Reynolds," the dean said with a nod. She met his eyes and smiled. "Thank you, sir." As she walked back to her seat, the crowd erupted in applause. She heard it all, Rachel's loud whistle, Ben's steady claps, and somehow her mom's quiet but certain cheer. Emma sat, diploma in hand, her heart full. "I'm not done yet, Grandpa, but I'm getting there." The farm hadn't changed much. The house still creaked when the wind hit it right, and the barn still smelled like hay and rain-soaked wood. But somehow it felt different. Emma stood at the edge of the property, gazing out at the fields. She could hear the distant bleating of goats and the low, soft neigh of willow. The sun hung low, casting a golden glow across the grass. It was quiet, but it was a different kind of quiet than before. It wasn't empty. It was full. Her boots crunched softly on the dirt path as she made her way back to the house. A soft breeze tugged at her hoodie, carrying the familiar, earthy smell of the farm. It had been 6 months since she graduated, and every day since had been a whirlwind of growth. "Hey, Doc," Rachel called from the garden, her hands covered in soil. "Goats limping again. You gonna work your vet magic or what?" Emma grinned, tilting her head toward the barn. Yeah, I'm on it." Her pace quickened, her heart light. She loved that nickname, Document. At first it had been a joke. Rachel called her Doc, after she'd managed to reset a goat's dislocated leg all on her own. But over time it had stuck. And now it felt like more than just a nickname. As she approached the goat pen, she spotted the familiar gray and white coat of Tucker, one of the most stubborn goats on the farm. He stood on 3 legs, lifting his back hoof like it had suddenly decided to betray him. "All right, Tucker," Emma sighed, pulling on her gloves. "Let's see what kind of trouble you've gotten into this time." Ben leaned against the fence, watching with a grin. "You ever think about just letting him figure it out himself?" Emma glanced up, smirking. "Yeah, but then I'd have to listen to him whine about it all day." Ben laughed, his grin wide and easy. "Fair point." With practiced hands, Emma checked Tucker's hoof, her fingers moving with the confidence of someone who'd done this 100 times. She found a small pebble lodged in the crevice, shook her head and pulled it free. "Drama King," she muttered as Tucker let out a soft bleat. "You'll live." Ben's grin widened. "World's first goat Oscar winner right there." Emma snorted, wiping her hands on her jeans. She glanced over at the house, where Cynthia stood on the porch, a watering can in hand, watering the potted plants she'd lined up along the front step. Cynthia had been on the farm for nearly a year now. At first, Emma had kept her at a distance, her heart still tender from the past. But little by little they'd found a rhythm. It started with the little things. Cynthia would bring her coffee before she headed out to the barn. Emma would show her how to clean the chicken coop. They didn't talk much at first, but after a while stories began to slip out. Stories about Walter. Stories about the mistakes Cynthia had made. "I thought Derek loved me," Cynthia said one night as they sat at the kitchen table peeling potatoes for dinner. Her voice was quiet, almost ashamed. "Thought he'd be different." Emma glanced at her mom, watching as her hands moved over the potato, slow and careful. "I know," Emma said softly. "I thought you'd be different too." Cynthia flinched at that, her knife stilling for a moment. But she didn't argue. She just nodded. "Yeah," she muttered. "I'm trying." "Good," Emma said, finishing her last potato. "Keep trying." That night, as Emma lay in bed, she thought of Walter again. She wondered if he'd be proud. "I think he would," she thought, closing her eyes. "I think he'd tell me I'm doing all right." On one quiet afternoon, Emma took a walk around the farm. She didn't have a reason to, no chores, no animals in distress, no Rachel dragging her off to see some new miracle carrot she'd grown. She just walked. Her fingers brushed against the wooden fence posts as she moved, her boots crunching softly on the dirt path. The sun was warm but not too hot. The air smelled fresh and green. She paused by the oak tree where Walter used to sit. His old chair was still there, the wood worn smooth from years of use. For a moment she just stood there, her eyes locked on that chair. "I did it, Grandpa," she thought, her chest tightening with something too big to name. "I did everything you said I could do." She sat down on the chair, leaning back, letting her eyes drift up to the sky. The clouds moved slow and steady, just like the way Walter used to talk. Her heart felt full. Full of everything she'd built. Full of love for Rachel, for Ben, for her mom, for Willow, for every chicken and goat she'd nursed back to health. And for herself, for the girl who'd been kicked out, for the girl who thought she had nothing. She tilted her head back, her eyes closed as the sun warmed her face. She let out a long, slow breath, her body sinking deeper into the chair. "Thanks, Grandpa," she whispered softly. The wind blew gently through the fields, carrying the faint rustle of leaves. It sounded like someone saying, "You're welcome, kid." Emma smiled, her eyes still closed, and for the first time in a long, long time, she felt completely at peace.